Hello, everyone. You just watched Daisuke Miyazaki's film Tourism. We've just been watching the enthusiasm in the chat. We're very excited with the response that you've all had to the very first film of Hyperlinks. Thrilled, actually. And I'm also thrilled to be joined right now after the film by Daisuke himself, who's coming to us live from Japan. Hello, Daisuke.
Hi.
We're also joined by Ayuka, who's living with Felix, actually. She's a Japanese filmmaker who's going to help us with translation during this interview. This is an experiment for all of us, but we're very grateful that she is here to help us out. So the first question I have is one that's come up in the chat a lot, which was about making the film on such a small budget. I've read that it took 5 days. Is that true?
It's true, yes. Actually, 4.5 days.
That seems quite difficult. Could you explain how you shot the film in and amongst crowds? Ayuka, if you could translate that, that'd be good.
Yep, we'll do.
日本語で言います。
はい、日本語で、じゃあ、トランスレートしますね。シンガポールの街で、いろんな人がたくさんいたと思うんですけど、そのゲリラシュートみたいな感じだった。
どうやったか。
はい、どうやって。
なんかシンガポールってその監視カメラとかがすごく厳しくて、その許可を取るのに何年もかかるとかって若いシンガポールの監督たちが言っていたんですよ。
はい。
で、そんなにかかんねえだろう、やって見せてやるから見てろよっていうことでですね。ロケハンには何回もシンガポールに行って相当念入りに僕が一人でやったんですけど、っていう徹底的にロケハンやったことですごく早く撮れました。あと制作部がとても優秀でした。
はい。So Singapore is very strict about CCTV cameras, and young Singapore filmmakers said to him that it takes a while, years and years, to take permissions and to film in the cities and stuff. So he and Daisuke and production team did a lot of location scouting, and he took a lot of time to location scout and did a lot of research that made him a lot easier to film in the city amongst the crowds. And so he did a lot of research and location scouting. That's the key.
あとカメラがこんなちっちゃかった iPhone だったんで誰も全然気づかなかったというのはあります。
なるほど。So they shot with an iPhone, which made the team a lot easier because no one really noticed that they were filming.
The film feels very loose and free. How much of it was scripted and how much was improvised?
Okay. 日本語で僕は自分の脚本は書いていまして、ただ、キャストには役者にはプロットに、日によって脚本を渡していて、その2つを使い分けながら撮影しました。から即興のようですけど結構僕の中では決まってました。
So he wrote the whole script, but he handed that script to actors. Depends on the day. So he handed the script one day of the shooting and another he didn't. So actors improved a lot. So it's the mix of improv and the scripted story, but he had the whole story in his mind.
I know you worked with Nina Endo for your film Yamato. How did you go about casting her again, but also the rest of the cast for Tourism?
撮影まで、もう本当に2ヶ月ぐらいしかなかったんで、割と知ってる役者を使った方がもう準備に時間がかけられないなという中でいいなと思いまして、それで遠藤ニナさん、普段から友達だった遠藤さんをキャスティングしたんですけど、遠藤さんが普段仲良かったのがそのすみれちゃんだったので、じゃあこのメンバーでお互い割と分かってるメンバーで行った方が今回みたいなタイトなスケジュールだといいんじゃないかということでした。
So he only had 2 months till the production, and he knew Endo-san for a while, and Sumire-san is a friend of Endo-san, so he thought it would be a good idea to go with friends group. Kind of, it'll be much easier for them to shoot in production, so he decided on that.
I saw in the credits that Nina Endo is listed as stylist as well. How much influence did the actors have on their fashion?
そうですね。シンガポールの出演者数名を除いてほぼ全部遠藤さんが準備して選んでいます。
So she did most of the costume except a few Singapore actors, people in Singapore scenes, just most of them.
Yeah, right. We've got a question from our chat, which is, were you ever tempted to let the story be a bit darker or a bit more dangerous? Or were you always intending to kind of make it a nice ending?
ですね。こう、人が知らないところに行って危ない体験をするっていう映画はもうどこにでもあると思っていて、それよりも僕が実際に世界を旅してみて、怖がりながら行ったけど、そうでもなかったとか、思ってたより全然みんな、例えば日本より親切だったみたいな経験を、今回は映画にしたいなと思っていて、まあ実際シンガポールではほとんどのこの出来事が僕が経験した出来事なので、あんまりダークな話は考えませんでした。
So there are a lot of movies, tourist movies about tourists experience dark kind of side of tourism, and he wanted to make it a very friendly kind of story because he actually experienced all that stories by himself, and lots of elements in the film is based on his experience, and that's the big reasons. One of the big reasons why he wanted to make it nice, like friendly film.
That makes sense. Since it's partly based on your experiences, I'm interested in Singapore being the choice of location. I saw at the end of the film there was a list about sort of how it was made. It was commissioned by a institute or an organization. Can you talk a bit about that?
まず映画自体が、シンガポールのアートサイエンス美術館と、シンガポール国際映画祭の共同企画出資で、作られた、美術展用の映像なんです。で、その美術展用の映像を、映画用に編集したのが、この作品です。っていうところまで翻訳していただきます。
美術館の名前何でしたっけ？
アートサイエンスミュージアムです。
So they shot this whole sequence for one museum, which is Art Science Museum in Singapore, and もう一つ何でしたっけ？
シンガポールインターナショナルフィルムフェスティバル。
Yeah, Singapore International Film Festival. So he shot a whole sequence for those institutes to submit the footage to those two organizations, museum and film festival. So based on those footage, they edited into a feature film.
でシンガポールってあんまり映画の撮影に向いてないと思っていたので、正直何を撮ったらいいのかよく分からなかったんですけど、もうちょっとフランクに自分の経験とかシンガポールのそのプラスチックじゃない方も撮れたらなとは思ってああいう映画にしました。
So Singapore is not really a filmmaker friendly country. It's very strict. So he wanted to show this side of friendliness, not being strict and just plastic part of the country. He wanted to show that friendly part.
In the film, there is a narrator, like a child's voice that comes up a few times. Where did that idea come from?
なんつったんですかね。今回自分の映画にいろんな視点を持ち込みたかったんですよね。ポリフォニーみたいな感じにしたくて、誰がこの映画を語ってるのかよくわからない、誰の話なのかよくわからないっていう状況にしたくて、その中で、子供の声っていうのを思いつきました。
So he wanted to bring lots of perspectives into the film. So the intention of bringing the voice of the child is that he wanted to make the film feels like you don't know whose story is it. Like he wanted to make it like you don't know whose story is it kind of thing.
The film ends with a line about New York City and about a meeting between the two main characters. I know the people in the chat have asked whether there will be a sequel about New York, but I've read that you planned a sequel in China. Could you kind of explain how these characters might live on?
次は中国の話をやりたいんですけど、もし中国でやるんだったら最初の男の子が中国の山奥に、修行しに行っちゃって1000人になって彼と会いに行くんだけど、中国は、スマホがうまく使えなくて迷子になるっていう話をやりたいです。で、最終的にはニューヨークで、この映画を終えたい、このシリーズを終えたいとは思ってるんですけど、実は途中でオーストラリアにも行きたいと最近思っていて、そのことをツイートしたら結構バズりました。
So for the next film, he wants to make a film about a guy at the first sequence of the film. So he is going to China and train as a Buddhist monk, kind of. What's the word? 千人じゃない。
千人なんていうんですか?
So yeah, Buddhist monk, like highest rank of Buddhist monk.
Yeah.
And then two girls will visit him in China, but in China, in
Hermit. すみません、どうぞ。
すみません。
Hermit になりそうです。
Hermit.
So the guy from the first scene tries to become a hermit in
okay.
the mountainside of China.
Yeah.
And the girls go and try to meet him, but they don't have the signal of their phone in China, so they get lost. Is the sequel I want to do in China. Yes, and I also want to do some sequel in Australia. And
wow.
I tweeted about it a few days ago and it buzzed. But the final story will be in New York, is my idea.
It's like a big, like before trilogy style thing, which is very cool. It's nice to see like a hangout film be considered as part of a big universe. I know that you worked with some quite incredible directors in the past. You worked with Kiyoshi Kurosawa on Tokyo Sonata and Leos Carax on his short film Murder, which became Holy Motors. Could you talk a bit about how you got to work with them and what that was like?
その映画学校に来た時に、バイト募集みたいな紙を見つけて、映画学校の入り口に貼ってあったんですけど、それで、応募して、監督は秘密って言われてたんですけど、それがまずレオス・カラックスの、仕事で、美術の手伝いをして、洞窟の穴をずっと掘り続けてたんですけど、何日も掘り続けて、ようやく撮影を迎えたら、監督が、やっぱりいらないっていうことだったんで、全部カットされたっていうの、ひどい経験をして、エンドクレジット、僕、大輔って名前ですけど、なぜかディミトリーって名前になってました。それがまずレオスの話で。
はい、翻訳します。
はい、どうぞ。はい、ここまで。
So when he went to a film school, he found a paper on a door of on the front door of the film school that said, we are looking for an assistant for this film. And they didn't say any names for director. And Daisuke went to this film set and started to digging a hole for this art set design. So he continued digging hole, but that scene was cut at the end. Or so he found out that that director was Leos Carax. I don't know how to say it correctly. So that's the story.
And my name on the credit was not Daisuke, but it was Dimitri somehow. And for and for Kiyoshi Kurosawa, it's like the same. My friend called me from my film school and said, "Are you free from tomorrow for like 2 months?" And I said, "Why?" But he said yes or no. So I said yes, and then he said, "Please go to the studio." And I went to the Nikkatsu studio, and I figured out it was Kiyoshi Kurosawa's shooting, and I was like, "Wow," because I was a big fan of him.
Yeah. Wow. I'm interested in how your films differ from, I guess, typical independent films in Japan, considering, you shot this in 5 days in a completely different country with very little money with your friends. How do your films differ from other independent films in Japan in terms of like how they're financed, where the money comes from, and what happens to them, how they're released?
難しいな。多分日本の監督は、やりたい話があるんだけどお金が足りなくてどうしようっていう考え方だと思うんですけど、僕は割となんかちょっとしたお金があるんだけどなんかできないって聞かれて、そのお金でやれるんだったらこんな面白いことできるかなっていう多分逆の考え方でやっていて、なんかすごいやりたい話とかあるんですかって言われるとなかなか難しくて、本当にその時の気分とかその時に感じているリアルを映画に反映します。
So for most of Japanese filmmakers who doesn't have a lot of money, who doesn't have any support, their idea of filmmaking is like, I have this idea, I want to make film about this theme, but they don't have a way to found themselves and get money. They don't have the ways to get money. But his Daisuke's way is like, I have this amount of money. What can I do with this money to make a film? And he is more like make a film about his current like situation, feeling. It depends on his mood and stuff. So the money is not really a big deal for him.
Interesting. I know in terms of the releases of the film, so tourism, I believe you control tourism, you own that and how that works. Your next film, Videophobia, you worked with a sales agent. How has that been different for you in terms of getting the film out there?
なんですかね。セールスエージェントに今回初めてそのフランスのエージェントに映画を買っていただいて、もっとすごい爆発的に広がるのかなとか新しい展開が見えるのかなと思ってた矢先にコロナが来てしまったので、まだそこは何とも言えないんですけれど、正直ちょっと自分一人でこうやって広げるのもなかなか限界があるので、もう一歩大きい、市場に、作品を広げていきたいなとは思ってます。
So French film distribution company bought his film Tourist.
Videophobias.
Videophobias.
New film です。
So he was expecting the film is going to be big in the world, but COVID thing happened now, and now it's just, he has to wait till he figure out now. And 次、何ですか、すいません。
もうちょっと ワールドディストリビューションできるといいですねって。
So yeah, he wants to the film to be bigger, hopefully, in the future when COVID is over.
Yeah, I hope so too. People who watched the film tonight seemed very interested in your other films. A lot of people have asked about where they can watch Yamato. Is Yamato online anywhere?
Unfortunately, it's ごめん、英語で答えちゃった。大丈夫ですか？Yes, unfortunately, it's not online, but I don't know. Maybe you can do an online screening if you want. I can.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, we might do that. People seem really interested in it, so maybe that's a good idea. One of the things that jumped out to a lot of people tonight is the music of the film. The dance sequence everyone loved. The music in the airport when they're walking through the airport filming on their phones, people loved that. Can you talk a bit about that music and where it came from and what it is?
僕は自分の映画でそのローカルなミュージシャンを使うように毎回していて、ヤマトっていうその前の映画の時はヤマトのミュージシャンを使ったんですけど、今回もシンガポールのミュージシャンを使おうと思って、何度か行ってるうちにシンガポールのアンダーグラウンドシーンがとても面白いっていうことに気づいて、その中の、R っていうバンドと、やりたいなと思ってオファーを出して、初めてそのサントラを最初にもらって、サントラに、基づいて演出とか、編集を考えたりしました。
So he likes to incorporate musics from local musicians. He found an artist in Singapore called R, and he decided to incorporate their music into his film for tourists. And also he used a local artist in his previous film, Yamato. So he got this soundtrack from the band R, and he had this idea in his mind based on that soundtrack, how to cut scenes and how to edit, construct stories. So the music is really a big part of his films.
Did you always plan to do the dance sequence, or did that just come up when you were filming?
And for the dance sequence, I used like southern hip hop, which I usually like to listen. And the guy who made the soundtrack for Yamato, the hip hop musician, made the track for me. And I really liked that scene too. The actress didn't want to do the scene because they didn't understand why they need the scene, but I forced them to dance, and I think it turned out to be a good scene.
It's a great scene. It's really fun. It's a great vibe. There's a question that's come in from the chat about food as well. Throughout the film, there's a sense of international food and how we engage with it at the start. Nina is eating hummus and has to explain what that is. And then, on the plane, they talk about their noodles. In Singapore, they're eating something else. How important is food to travel for you?
そうですね。シンガポール好きなんですけど、基本的にモールばっかりだと思ってたので、唯一の楽しみが食事だったんですよね。で、やっぱり日本に帰ってくると本当に食事って人間にとって大事だなと思うことが多かったり、やっぱり物を食べるっていうのは人が生きてる基本にあることだと思うんで、宮崎駿先生のアニメでもそれがよく映されてると思うんで、今回もっていうか毎回やってるんですけど、食事は僕にとって大事なテーマです。
So food is really a big part of his films. Food, eating is a big part of our basic, big part of our life, basics of our lives. And as portrayed in Miyazaki's films, Miyazaki Hayao's Ghibli films, is big part of, life. So he wanted to portray that part. And food is really a big part of his theme.
Oh, and Singapore food is good, so I wanted to this scripted in my film. Maybe Singapore is like famous for their good food, so why not film it? Was my idea.
You also have like food is what ends up bringing people together in the scene with the family near the end. And you film it almost like, the Last Supper, this painting, they're all sitting there at the table and it's this big moment. It's a lovely moment, actually. There's a question about what your plans are for your films that aren't the story of these two. So you've made Videophobia, which, as I understand, is a story about, is it set in one room about a woman and a sex tape?
It's not one room. It's
not
about
one room. Okay.
The city of Osaka, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what films are you looking to make, or what kind of films do you want to make moving forward? I know previously in an interview you've said that you like to change genres every film, make a detective movie, then a crime movie. What are you looking to make in the future?
I hope to make like a comedy movie. But the film I am preparing now for next year is like a suspense, like the girl with the dragon tattoo kind of a movie.
It would be fun to watch a girl with the dragon tattoo movie that's kind of it's similar to tourism. Like it's, like friends hanging out and then suddenly something goes wrong and it becomes dragon tattoo. Or I'd like to see that kind of merger between them.
For the first time in my career, it has like a book, so original book. So it's more suspense and thriller is what I think.
The chat has also asked about your filmmaking influences. What films and filmmakers have had the most impact on you?
That's which country?
Well, any country really.
Any country.
There was a film that came up in the chat, L'Avventura. This Italian film came up. People were reminded of that watching tourism in terms of like it's a story and then suddenly someone gets lost and the film becomes something else.
Exactly. Yes. I like the film very much too. What was it? Antonioni,
Yeah.
Yes, and I like Bernardo Bertolucci. And who else? It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, we put you on the spot a bit. I'm sorry.
Orson Welles.
Orson Welles, yeah.
Yeah, and John Ford.
John Ford's a big one.
Olivier Assayas. And of course, Jean-Luc Godard. Who else? There's too much director. I'm very big.
Maybe I should be more specific. Were there any films that you were thinking about when you made Tourism?
Okay. Some films of Jacques Rivette.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And also, of course, Jean-Luc Godard. And the films of Sean Baker.
Sean Baker's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that's because your tourism is shot a bit on phones as well. There's that.
Yes.
It's making us feel like we're there. I really like how you move from your camera to their camera. Like when they're walking through the airport tunnel, it keeps changing. It's interesting to see that. People in our chat were talking about how it feels half documentary, half fiction. Not because of the story, but because of the cameras, because you keep changing to their phones.
So for the camera movement, I think some of the films from Gus Van Sant, like Jerry, and also the crowd scene is something from Jia Jiangku, the Chinese director, and and Ozu, of course, for the Last Supper dinner scene by the Muslim people. So many, I think, influence in most of the scene. But my basic idea is the French Nouvelle Vague, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Ayuka, do you have any questions that you want to ask?
So as a director of photography myself, how did you know director of photography for your films, Tourism, Yamato?
For Yamato, I worked as an assistant director for like Kurosawa-san and other directors, and she's the DP of Kurosawa-san for more than 10 years. So I met her there, and I was a bad assistant director, so she didn't like me as assistant director. But one day she asked me, "Do you have any script?" And I gave her my script, and she said, "This is kind of interesting, the opposite of how you work on the set. So I want to help you," is what she said. And for the tourism, the DP is very young. I met him when I was producing my films, my friend's film. And he wasn't like, he was a more experimental DP, but I kind of educated him through years, and now he's, I think, one of the most cool young DPs in Japan. Yes.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
I'll give one last question, which is from the chat, which is about how often you get lost when you travel.
To be honest, when I go to foreign country, I try to get lost. I mean, I don't use any smartphone or map. I just wander around and get lost. And of course, I'm scared if I might get, like murdered or something. But basically, I try to wander around the city. And everywhere I go, I try to bump into someone or bump into something. And I think that's the best thing of traveling, and how you can run away from this everything Google world. Yes.
And it makes for good stories. I mean, this is a film that's an example of that. Nina wanders off, but then ultimately doesn't have that bad an experience.
Yes.
She learns something new about Singapore, about the people who live there. I think that's something that a lot of people in the chat responded to, is that sense of like, you can still have an interesting time if you just trust that people are going to help you.
Yes. Everyone's scared of others all the time, and like, especially when you go to foreign countries, everyone gets scared. But the world is not so bad, is so far my experience, and I hope to describe it through my film.
That's a lovely way to end it, I think. Thank you very much for your film, Tourism. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Thank you, Ayuka, for it's a wonderful, amazing translation effort. Very thankful.
I'm nervous. Sorry for mistranslations sometimes.
And what we'll do is we'll get back in touch with you and see if we can organize a screening of your last film, because a lot of people are very excited to see it. So
of course, anytime. Thank you.